Imagine a battlefield bathed in golden light, dust swirling as two champions lock eyes, hearts pounding, one destined for glory, the other for tragedy. Welcome to the saga of Troy and Achilles, where gods meddle, heroes clash, and love and vengeance collide in a whirlwind of destiny. Before we dive in, hey, if you're loving this epic tale, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss a single twist. Our story kicks off long before shields clash. At a wedding party no mortal was invited to. Peleus, a great warrior king, and Thetis, a sea nymph with shimmering hair, tied the knot. All the gods came, except one. Eris, the goddess of discord, seethed at the snub. In a spiteful flourish, she tossed down a single glimmering golden apple inscribed, "For the fairest." Cue instant chaos. Three goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, each claimed it. Zeus, not wanting to play judge, pointed to a Trojan prince, Paris, handsome but somewhat reluctant, saying, "You decide." Talk about a pressure cooker. Hera offered him power, Athena offered victory in war, but Aphrodite swore she'd win him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen of Sparta, already married to King Menelaus. Paris took the apple, chose Aphrodite, and set the die rolling for war. Now, picture Helen, radiant, witty, and a bit weary of royal life. When Paris arrived in Troy, Aphrodite had whispered sweet deceptions into Helen's ear. Soon, the two eloped, crossing seas back to Troy. Menelaus's fury blazed. His brother Agamemnon, the most powerful Greek monarch, rallied every king and hero of Achaea with one rallying cry: retrieve Helen and restore honor. Across the wine-dark sea, thousands of ships set sail toward destiny. And at the heart of these ships was one man, Achilles, son of Peleus and Thetis. Fabled as the greatest warrior of his age, his mother had dipped him in the river Styx as a baby, rendering him invulnerable, except for the heel by which she held him. Smooth, fearless, almost otherworldly, Achilles burned with a hunger to prove himself. Yet, his heart, deep as the ocean, carried a touch of mortal doubt. Was glory worth the cost? So, here we are. Gods scheming, princes plotting, and an army gathering for the greatest siege the world has ever known. Next up, we meet the key players, heroes and rulers whose fates intertwine. Hang tight, because we're about to step onto Trojan soil, where honor will be tested, alliances will shatter, and one man's wrath will change everything. All right, let's roll onward. Picture the grand city of Troy, its high walls gleaming under the sun, and King Priam, an elderly, kind-hearted ruler, sitting on his marble throne. Priam's seen multiple summers and knows well the weight of prophecy, that Troy's fate may well rest on the shoulders of a few key players. First, there's Hector, Priam's eldest son and Troy's champion. He's noble through and through, the epitome of a warrior prince. Every morning, he dons his bronze armor, kisses his young wife Andromache and their son's forehead, and vows to protect Troy at all costs. Yet beneath that steadfast resolve, there's a man who fears for his family's safety and sometimes wonders if destiny will be kind. You've heard of Paris already, and not without reason. Handsome, yes, but more of a dreamer than a soldier. He loves poetry, the gentle strum of the lyre, and, of course, his golden prize, Helen. He's a soft rebel, sliding between palace politics with a roguish grin. But let's not underestimate him. His choice in the apple set the wheels of war in motion. Then there's Helen herself. Think of her as the world's first celebrity, admired everywhere, painted on vases, sung about in odes. Yet, stripped of pageantry, she's just a woman torn between two worlds, home in Sparta with Menelaus, or a precarious new life in Troy. Does she regret the elopement? Does she long for the familiar corridors of her old palace? Only she knows. On the Greek side, Agamemnon, Menelaus' older brother, reigns supreme, a fierce king with a booming voice and ambitions the size of his war fleet. He's charismatic and commanding, but also stubborn and proud. His word is law among the Greeks, and he's determined to show that no slight goes unpunished. But wait, don't forget the crafty Odysseus, king of Ithaca. He's lean, sharp-eyed, and always calculating 3 steps ahead. Where other heroes charge head first, Odysseus weaves webs of trickery, relying more on his tongue than his sword. Need a plan? He's your man. And then Achilles, our superstar warrior, aloof yet magnetic. Unable to ignore a challenge, he trains on dusty shores, practices with his Myrmidon warriors, and listens to his mother's sea-song warnings. Beware the day wrath turns brother against brother. Every hero's been summoned by Agamemnon's heralds. In palace halls from Mycenae to Pylos, rumors fly. Who will stand beside Achilles? Will Odysseus outwit his rivals? Can Hector defend those walls? Each man answers fate in his own way, loading ships with supplies, saying tearful goodbyes, swallowing fear and pride. Meanwhile, the gods are watching. Hera still fumes over Paris's choice. Athena sharpens her warcraft. Aphrodite smiles softly on Helen and Paris. Poseidon rumbles beneath the waves, and Zeus, from his lofty throne, weighs the scales of fate. Remember, in this world, mortals are chess pieces in a divine game, and any moment, a god's whisper can tip the balance. So, the Greek armada gathers. Their sails billow white like storm clouds on the horizon as they set sail for Troy. On the decks, Achilles grips his spear, Odysseus eyes the sea with wily intent, and Agamemnon calls, "To glory!" At the sight of those warships, Trojan sentries raise the alarm and the city's gates brace for impact. Hold your breath, because next, we step onto the battlefield's blood-soaked sands and witness the first clashing of heroes. Who'll score the opening blow? Who'll taste the sting of defeat? Get ready, because civilization's greatest war is about to erupt. The sun rose like a fiery eye over Troy's walls as the two armies faced off across the dusty plain. On one side, the Greeks, shields locked shoulder to shoulder, spears pointed like a forest of deadly arrows. On the other, the Trojans, organized and determined, their banners snapping in the breeze. Silence hung thick until the first war cry shattered it. Hector, heart pounding, raised his sword high and charged. His Myrmidon counterpart, Achilles, spotted him from afar. Though, at this early point, Achilles kept his distance, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Instead, it was Paris who sprinted forward, loose arrow knocked and ready. He let it fly, aiming for Menelaus himself. The shaft whistled, and Menelaus barely raised his shield in time. Clang! The arrow bounced off, and Menelaus barked orders to the ranks. Hold steady! Meanwhile, Ajax the Great, a broad-shouldered giant in bronze, lunged at Hector. Their clash shook the earth, sword against spear, shield against shield. Hector ducked a blow, countered with a swift thrust, and forced Ajax back. On the sidelines, Helen watched, remorse flickering in her eyes. Each crash of metal a reminder of her choices. Odysseus, ever the strategist, circled the battlefield's edge, rallying men, patching armor, whispering tactics. He spotted Diomedes press too far forward and called him back. "Remember, friend, valor without sense is a blade that cuts itself." Diomedes grinned and reeled in his charge, trusting Odysseus's counsel. Back at the gates, Paris recovered bow and quiver and found Helen in the crowd. She reached out. Was it comfort or farewell? But before he could respond, a horn sounded. Agamemnon strode forward, face grim. "Men, we fight for our honor, our homes, and for Menelaus' name. Let no Trojan stand in our way." On a barren stretch of field, Achilles finally descended. He strode like a storm, cloak billowing, hair catching the light. Trojans froze at the sight. This was the man the bards hailed as unstoppable. His spear sliced through the air, sending a Trojan foot soldier sprawling. With each step, Achilles' fury seemed to grow. Centuries of expectation weighed on him, promising glory but whispering of doom. The first day ended with the sun dipping low, blood-stained earth soaking up the victories and defeats of both sides. Neither army had broken, neither hero had fallen. But cracks appeared, friendships tested, loyalty wavering, and whispers of divine intervention fluttered through the ranks. Who had the gods favored? Would Achilles' wrath erupt too soon, or could Hector's honor withstand the storm? As twilight cloaked the plain, both sides retreated to their camps, shields battered, spirits bruised, minds racing. Tomorrow would mark the first duel of champions, Hector versus whoever dared step forward. And somewhere in that tense stillness, Achilles' heart thundered with a promise. Soon, I will carve my name into history. Stick around, because in block number 4, we witness that duel, and the tension will be so thick you could cut it with a sword. Dawn broke with a hush as both armies gathered on the plain, their breath misting in the cool air. It was time for the duel every soldier whispered about. Hector, Troy's noble defender, against the mightiest Greek champion who dared to answer the call. First, envoys from both sides met in the no-man's land, shields set aside. Both armies held their breath. This duel could decide the day. Who steps forward? Hector's voice rang out over the field. Tall and unflinching, he adjusted his plumed helmet. The Greeks murmured, shifting from foot to foot, eyes darting. One by one, champions came and fell silent. Then Ajax, towering, broad-shouldered Ajax, strode out. His shield gleamed like the full moon, his greaves sang with every step. Hector gave a respectful nod. Ajax returned it, muscles coiled like springs. The two circled, spears at the ready. Would this be a quick end or a battle to remember? Their spears clashed with a thunderous crack that echoed off the hills. Hector's skilled thrust met Ajax's brute strength. Back and forth they fought. Hector's quick feints against Ajax's raw power. The Trojan prince darting in, drawing blood, then retreating before Ajax could answer. Sparks flew when metal met metal. Each warrior took hits. Ajax's shield dented, Hector's arm nicked, but neither yielded. On the sidelines, Odysseus chewed his lip, calculating the next moves, while Andromache pressed her palms together, praying for Hector's safety. On the Greek side, Achilles watched from his tent opening, cloak pulled tight, eyes like a storm gathering at sea. After what seemed like hours, both champions stepped back, exhausted. Ajax threw down his spear and raised Hector's hand. Hector smiled, lifting Ajax's great arm in victory. The war cries rose from both camps, respect mingling with rivalry. For a moment, the world seemed balanced, neither side triumphant. But as they returned to their ranks, whispers spread. Despite Ajax's valor, the balance of power was shifting. The Greeks had tasted what Troy could do when united under Hector's command. The Trojans had seen that even their greatest warrior could be matched. And then, like a dark thunderclap, a messenger galloped from the Greek ships. Agamemnon had quarreled with Achilles over a prized captive woman, Briseis. Achilles felt insulted, his honor wounded deeper than any spear. Swearing he would no longer fight under Agamemnon's banner, Achilles retreated to his tent, Myrmidon warriors trailing behind in stunned silence. Hector grinned at the news. Without Achilles, could Troy finally break the Greek line? The Trojan ranks surged forward, swords raised, eager to press the advantage. Morning light slanted across the Greek camp, but inside Achilles' tent, the air was heavy with rage. He'd stormed in last night, ripped off his armor, and tossed it at Agamemnon's feet, an insolent declaration that he'd sit out this war over honor. His Myrmidons looked on, torn between loyalty and fear. Without their unbeatable champion, the Greeks felt like a body without a heartbeat. Agamemnon, sensing collapse, bellowed orders. Summon every able warrior. We'll fill the gap however we can. But even as hoplites trained and reinforcements scrambled ashore, a pall settled over the ranks. The line felt brittle, the air tasted of doubt. Meanwhile, in Troy, Hector's eyes sparkled with opportunity. "Tonight, we strike!" he thundered to his brothers in arms. The city walls rose thick and proud, but even they quivered at the prospect of a night assault. Trojans sharpened swords, girded shields, and prayed to Athena and Apollo for guidance. Back in the Greek camp, news rippled. Patroclus, Achilles' dearest friend and cousin, had watched the whole spectacle in mounting worry. He crept into Achilles' tent at dawn. "Achilles," he pleaded, voice low, "the Greeks will perish without you. Let me don your armor, lead the Myrmidons, and scare the Trojans into thinking you've returned to battle. Just for a day." Achilles stared at Patroclus, the fire of wrath still in his eyes. He opened his lips to refuse, then closed them, knowing his friend's heart was steel. At last he nodded, reluctantly handing over the gleaming breastplate that bore his name. "But come back alive," he whispered. "I can't lose you too." Word spread like wildfire. Achilles rejoined the fight. From the ramparts, Trojan scouts gasped at the sight of that famous armor gleaming on the battlefield. Their courage wavered. In the chaos, Patroclus led a fierce charge, driving Trojans before him and pushing them back to the gates. Yet, deep within the smoky haze, a shadow stirred. Apollo, patron of Troy, watched with a frown. He hadn't forgotten the divine balance. If mortals grew too bold, a god would remind them of their place. Across the field, Paris readied an arrow. Hera sharpened her claws, and fate tightened its grip. The clash would decide more than a city wall's fate. It would seal the future of two souls bound by friendship and rage. Will Patroclus' daring gamble succeed? Or will the gods twist this day into a tragedy? The battlefield roared as Patroclus, clad in Achilles' gleaming armor, led the Myrmidons forward like a tide of steel. Greek soldiers, hearts lifted at the sight of their hero's supposed return, surged beside him. Patroclus' voice rang out, "For Achilles! For Greece!" And the Trojans stumbled back, panic twisting their ranks. For a few brilliant hours, it seemed the tide had turned. Patroclus cut through Trojan lines, his spear flashing in the sun. He stood toe-to-toe with Hector, calling him out, "Face me, proud prince." Hector, bound by honor and smoldering rage over his city's endangered walls, accepted the challenge. Their duel crackled with intensity. Wood against bronze, shouts and grunts drowning out the clamor around them. But then, under Apollo's unseen hand, Patroclus' luck unraveled. First his spear splintered, then his armor, though mighty, was no match for divine interference. Hector, seizing the moment, landed a crushing blow that sent Patroclus sprawling. In those final seconds, the world slowed. Patroclus' breath came sharp. His eyes met Hector's, and he realized the grave cost of his daring ruse. "Spare me, Achilles' friend," he breathed, but mercy was drowned by the war cries. Hector drove his sword home, and Patroclus fell. The Myrmidons recoiled in horror as Hector stripped the famous armor, parading it like a trophy. At that moment, the gods lingered in silence, an ominous pause before the storm. Back at the Greek camp, that silvered breastplate had been Achilles' banner of glory. Now it hung upon Hector's shoulder. A messenger arrived in ragged breath. "He's dead! Patroclus is dead, and Hector wears Achilles' armor." The words struck like a thunderclap. Achilles, who had brooded in his tent, flung open his doors. A primal scream tore from his throat, echoing off tents and shields. His grief and rage merged into a force no mortal could contain. The camp fell deadly silent. Men braced themselves, knowing the man who had once held back would unleash a tempest of vengeance. And somewhere, beyond the walls, Troy shuddered. Its greatest champion had just struck a blow that would awaken a warrior's wrath unlike any the world had seen. In the silent aftermath, Achilles' grief ignited into something fierce and all-consuming. He threw off his mourning cloak, yanked on new armor, gifts from his mother Thetis herself, forged by Hephaestus, and strode out of his tent like a vengeful storm. His arrival on the battlefield was electric. Greek soldiers straightened, voices rose in a single roar, and even the hardiest veteran felt a chill. Achilles' first step was toward the river Scamander, where his friend's body lay. He scooped up Patroclus in trembling arms, whispering apologies that no hero could ever answer. By his tears, the Myrmidons knelt, lining the banks in silent respect. Then Achilles slammed his fist on the ground. "I will cut Troy's defenders down until the walls tremble," he bellowed. His words were a promise, but also a warning. Mercy would not survive this day. With spear in hand, Achilles launched himself back into war. Trojans fell like wheat before the harvest. Every clash of bronze on bronze carried the weight of his anguish. Every fallen enemy stoked his wrath. He moved through the battlefield with a terrifying grace, his spear a blur, his shield a bulwark. Greek ships at the shore trembled under his thunderous footsteps as he drove the Trojans back toward the city gates. Hector, watching from the ramparts, felt the earth shake beneath Achilles' onslaught. He rallied the defenders, archers knocked arrows, steeds neighed, and priests cried out to the gods. Yet for every arrow loosed, Achilles' shield seemed to grow stronger. For every prayer, his fury burned brighter. The Trojan line buckled as if an earthquake had struck. Then came the moment that poets will sing for ages. Achilles and Hector finally met face to face. Hector, clad in Hector's own captured armor, towered with pride and desperation. Achilles, fresh from slaughter, eyes blazing like molten bronze, raised his spear. Time slowed, spears leveled, hearts thundered. And in that heartbeat, two destinies collided. Will Hector stand against his greatest foe? Or will Achilles' wrath consume Troy's last hope? The air crackled as Achilles and Hector faced one another on the blood-soaked plain. Dust swirled around their sandaled feet, and both warriors gripped their spears like extensions of their very souls. Hector's chest heaved. He'd already seen comrades fall before this indomitable force. Achilles' armor gleamed under the sun, each plate forged by gods, each edge honed for vengeance. They charged. Spears collided with a thunderous clang that echoed through the silent armies. Hector lunged, managing to nick Achilles' shield, but the Greek hero's counterstrike was swift and brutal. Hector barely raised his arm in time. They circled, breath coming in ragged bursts, each studying the other's rhythm, looking for that one opening. Hector remembered Andromache's tearful plea, "Come home to me." He summoned every ounce of courage and thrust forward, but Achilles sidestepped, spearing Hector's thigh, blood blossoming on bronze. The Trojan prince grunted, staggering, and Achilles pressed the attack. "You killed my friend!" he roared, voice shaking the ranks. "Now you will bleed for it." With a final, devastating riposte, Achilles drove his spear through Hector's exposed neck. Time seemed to pause as Hector's eyes widened, realizing fate had turned against him. He stumbled, collapsing at Achilles' feet. Silence fell like a shroud over both armies. Achilles stood over Hector's dying form, chest heaving, tears mingling with sweat. He kicked the body, snarling, "So fall Troy's greatest defender!" And with that, he mounted his chariot, dragging Hector's corpse behind him. The sight was grotesque, yet it struck terror into every Trojan heart. Inside the city gates, Queen Hecuba and King Priam fell to their knees at the walls, wailing. Andromache fainted in her brother's arms, the weight of loss too much to bear. The gods themselves seemed to shudder. Athena averted her gaze. Apollo's arrows fell silent in their quiver. But Achilles' vengeance wasn't sated. For days he refused to give Hector's body back, staking it out, desecrating it under the hot sun. Only when old Priam, trembling and grief-stricken, climbed Achilles' tent and begged, offering ransom, tears, even his own life, did the hero relent. In a moment steeped in raw humanity, Achilles' rage cracked. He handed over Hector's body, and for a fleeting heartbeat, mortal and monster met eye to eye, two fathers mourning sons. Yet, the war was far from over. The Trojans mourned, the Greeks steeled themselves for what lay ahead, and the prophecy loomed. Troy's fate was sealed, but not until the cleverest ploy of all time was unleashed. Okay, picture this. The dust of battle finally settles, and both sides lick their wounds. The Trojans mourn Hector. Their city's shield feels shattered. The Greeks hold feasts in their tents, toasting Patroclus and Hector's ransom, but the hunger for one last victory gnaws at them. Enter Odysseus, sly grin in place, weaving the most daring plan the world's ever seen. Under the cover of night, the Greeks pretend to pack up. They light no torches, echoing the clatter of oars as if entire fleets are rowing home. Only one ship remains by the shore, its crew hiding in hushed shadow. At the sandy edge, they build an enormous wooden horse, higher than two men stacked, hollow inside, with a ramp for secret entry. Each plank is fitted perfectly, and on its flank they carve a message. To Athena, from the Greeks, accept this gift, spare Troy. Meanwhile, the rest of the Greek armada really does sail away, disappearing into the dark horizon. The city of Troy bursts into celebration. "The war is over," they chant. Priam orders the gates flung wide. Trojans wheel the giant horse inside, dragging it over cobbles and past homes, cheering crowds tossing petals at its carved hooves. How many times in history has joy blindsided prudence? Casually, a few Trojans warn caution. Laocoon, a Trojan priest, hurls his spear into the horse's belly. "Beware, Greeks bearing gifts!" he bellows. Cracks splinter the wood. But then, instantly from rooftops and gates, a shout rings out. "Sacrilege!" Infuriated, the crowd turns on Laocoon. Before he can retreat, monstrous serpents, sent by Athena or Apollo, depending on which source you trust, slither from the sea and coil around him and his sons, hissing prophecy and death. The city's faith shatters. They're convinced the horse is sacred. Laocoon's plea is silenced forever. Inside the dark horse, dozens of Greek warriors hold their breath. Agamemnon, Menelaus, even Diomedes and Odysseus himself. Their hearts pound. Each faint noise from above sends a shiver down their spines. But no one suspects this is the turning point. Morale sky high, Trojans torch the Greek camp on the beach, singing war songs in honor of victory. They feast on roasted lamb, wine flowing like rivers, lamps burning bright in every hall. Meanwhile, silence reigns in the horse's hollow belly, silent but for the stifled breathing of men ready to change history. And now, the big question. When will the Greeks inside burst forth? What signal will set the trap snapping shut on Troy? Night draped its velvet cloak over Troy, lanterns glowing like fireflies in every courtyard. The city sang with triumph, music and laughter spilling from open gates. But inside that hulking wooden stranger, Periphetes' nightmare, Greek warriors crouched in darkness, muscles coiled like springs. Every heartbeat rattled in their ears. Every footstep outside threatened to shatter the fragile calm. Inside the palace, Priam's guests toasted the gods. They danced across marbled floors, forehead garlands bobbing like blossoms. Cassandra, the princess cursed to foretell truth, yet never be believed, wandered the halls, eyes wide with dread. "Beware the wooden stallion!" she cried, hands clawing at the air. Her voice, like a bitter breeze, fell on deaf ears. They laughed her off as drunk or mad. Back by the horse, the Trojans laid torches at its feet, an offering to Athena's favor. By moonlight, the structure's seams gleamed. Then, with a final flourish, the city's gates clanged shut, the keys turning like fate's black tumblers. No sly whisper warned them that this bolt would never open again. At that precise moment, low murmurs stirred inside the horse. Odysseus, silent commander, crept to the narrow exit ramp. He glanced at Agamemnon and Menelaus, grim faces etched with anticipation, then gave a curt nod. One by one, 20 warriors slithered down the ramp into Troy's sleeping streets, silent as shadows, spears at the ready. They slipped along alleyways, cutting torches to smother pools of light, marking a path for the rest. Soon, hundreds more poured through the gate, Diomedes, Nestor, even Achilles' myrmidons, still buzzing from vengeance. Their armor whispered over cobblestones, their swords gleamed with promise. At the same time, a distant signal rose, a single hushed trumpet note from the waiting ships. Across the sea, the Greek fleet, hidden behind a rocky promontory, turned back toward Troy in the night. Waves slapped the hulls as soldiers tightened their grips on shields and spears. The trap snapped shut in silence and stealth. Troy lay breathless on the edge of ruin, unaware that the true nightmare had only just begun. Will the Trojans wake to slaughter and flames? Or can a last-ditch hero rally them in time? The early hours of dawn still draped Troy in shadows when the first alarms finally rang out. A lone watchman, half asleep, half in disbelief, spotted torches bobbing through the eastern gate and unleashed his horn in a terrified blast. "Treason! The Greeks are inside!" he screamed as the city shattered into panic. From every quarter, soldiers poured forth. Trojan youths grabbed whatever weapons they could, rusted swords, broken spears, even farming tools, while veterans scrambled to don what armor remained. From the palace steps, Priam himself emerged, white-haired and trembling, a spear thrust into one hand and an old shield in the other. Beside him, Aeneas, young but resolute, rallied a band of defenders. Hold the line by the market gate, stop them from reaching the royal quarters. Through narrow lanes, Greek warriors struck like vipers. Diomedes and Nestor surged in first, hacking at gates and sending splintered wood flying. Screams echoed as houses were torched and startled families fled in terror. Odysseus slipped past a doomed guard, blade at his throat, whispering, "Quiet, or I'll end you." The man melted away, and Troy's central square fell silent, an eerie calm before the slaughter. But not all fought with steel alone. Cassandra, still cloaked in tragedy, ran through the screaming crowds, flinging herself in front of attackers to warn them of doom. Some thought her mad, others cursed her. They scattered around her like leaves in a gale, heedless as she wailed. The palace doors slammed shut, and within those marble halls, Priam's household braced for the worst. In the market gate, Aeneas' small force met Ajax and Teucer head-on. Shields clanged, spears splintered, and in the fog of war, heroism and savagery entwined. Aeneas fought with the desperation of a man defending everything he loved, his home, his people, his future. He managed to cut down 2 Greek veterans before Ajax pinned him against a pillar. A cry went up, and a spear from Teucer saved him at the last second, sending Ajax sprawling. The loyal Trojans pulled Aeneas to safety and retreated toward the palace. Outside the city walls, the sea's horizon burned with the entire Greek fleet returning to wreak havoc. Agamemnon landed at the beach, rallying his men. "Remember Menelaus, remember Patroclus, Troy dies tonight." Behind him, Achilles' Myrmidons followed, ready to avenge every fallen comrade. Back in the palace, Priam took shelter in the inner courtyard with his daughters and grandsons. He scanned the turmoil through arrow slits, Trojan troops cut down, walls stained red. In that moment, a hulking form burst through the broken gates. Neoptolemus, Achilles' son, eyes cold as winter. "Your reign ends," he declared, hefting his spear. Priam raised his broken shield and charged, old blood roaring with ancient pride. Will Priam's courage save even one life? Or will the young warrior's vengeance prove too swift? Priam's heart thundered in his chest as he faced Neoptolemus. Little Achilles, they'd come to call him. The youth's spear wavered with anticipation. In that courtyard lined with crumbling marble and torn tapestries, an old king held only a crooked shield and burning pride. "Stand down, old man," Neoptolemus snarled, stepping forward. But Priam's voice, raspy yet resolute, echoed against the stone walls. "You dishonor the gods by spilling royal blood in my own home." He lunged with surprising speed for his age, jabbing the spear crackling with feeble strength. The point glanced off Neoptolemus's greaves with a metallic ping, enough to surprise the boy, but not to stop him. With a thunderous strike, Neoptolemus countered, driving Priam back. A groan escaped the king's lips as the spear tip grazed his side, tearing his tunic. Daughters behind barred gates sobbed, their father, their monarch, bleeding. Priam steadied himself, spite shining in his eyes. "If you thirst for blood, spill mine," he rasped, raising his shield for one last stand. At that moment, a war cry rose from the ruined hall's entrance. Aeneas, spear in hand, back from the front lines, rallying Troy's final defenders. "For the fallen! For our home!" he roared. A ragged band of survivors, women wielding broken chairs, youths clutching scythes, charged down the corridor. They smashed into the Greeks like a tidal wave, buying Priam those precious seconds. Neoptolemus spun, shield raised, as a torch-bearing Trojan lobbed flame at his back. The fire caught his cloak, and he flailed, giving Priam space to stagger free. The old king stumbled toward the inner keep, clutching the wound at his side. Aeneas fought on, bolting doors and shoving carts to slow the invaders. In the courtyard, the clash of desperate defenders and ruthless invaders sent sparks into the night. Priam, bleeding but unbroken, disappeared behind a shattered pillar, seeking a hidden exit. Neoptolemus roared defeat, calling more Myrmidons to the hunt. The screams of the wounded mingled with the clashing of swords, painting Troy's final portrait in crimson light. Through a narrow postern gate, Priam slipped into the moonlit streets, guided by loyal guards who sacrificed themselves for one last act of service. Behind him, the palace fell into chaos as Greeks broke down inner doors and spilled into sacred halls, torchlight flickering on broken statues and tattered tapestries. Where would Priam flee? Could he reach safety in Hellespont's winding alleys? And what doom awaited those left behind in Troy's dying heartbeat? Priam stumbled through the narrow streets of Troy, guided by the flicker of torches and the hushed footsteps of his few remaining guards. Walls that once echoed with laughter and song now groaned under the weight of destruction. Every corner brought fresh horror, smoldering homes, fallen warriors, and grieving families fleeing into the night. They reached a hidden stairway sloping down toward the city's edge, where the Hellespont's inky waters lapped against stone docks. Priam's breath came in ragged gasps as he climbed. Behind him, the cries of invaders grew nearer, Greeks hunting the last vestiges of royalty. One guard, bleeding from a gash on his temple, crumpled to the ground. Priam knelt beside him, pressing a trembling hand to the soldier's chest. "Go," he whispered, "live to tell our tale." The guard managed a weak salute before fading into darkness. At the bottom of the steps, a small fishing boat bobbed on the black water, its oars tied neatly to the hull. A loyal fisherman, his face drawn with fear, helped Priam aboard. "Quickly, my lord," he urged, casting off. Priam sank to the bench, blood seeping through his tunic, but his eyes burned with defiance. As the boat drifted into the river's current, he gazed back at the smoldering silhouette of Troy, its temples shattered, its towers crumbled. Meanwhile, inside the palace, Neoptolemus stood over the fallen bodies of Priam's household guards, heroes who'd held the gates. He sheathed his sword with a grim look, then strode into the inner sanctum. There, in the throne room, lay the spoils of war, treasures plundered, ivory chests torn open, and statues desecrated. He spat in disgust at the desecration of holy ground, yet soldiers cheered him on, drunk on conquest. But even as Troy's stones cracked and its fires raged, hope flickered elsewhere. Aeneas, battered and bloodied, had escaped the palace alongside Cassandra. Guided by her haunted visions, they navigated catacombs beneath the city, ancient tunnels built for secret rites. Torchlight danced on damp walls carved with runes, and the air smelled of earth and secrets. "Father?" Cassandra whispered, pausing at a fork in the tunnel. "Where do we go?" Aeneas placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "To the coast," he replied. "We'll sail to find a new home, one where Troy's flame can burn again." Cassandra's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, her prophetic burden lightened by a sliver of hope. Above ground, the last Greeks prepared to burn Troy to the ground. Flames licked the sky, and the cries of widows and orphans rose in a mournful chorus. Yet, in the hidden tunnels and a drifting boat on the Hellespont, the final embers of Troy's legacy prepared to spark a new beginning. And so, as dawn's first light crept across the horizon, Troy fell, but her spirit would live on in those who fled. The first pale light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a chilling glow on Troy's ruins. In the fishing boat drifting toward the open sea, Priam's breaths grew shallow. His bloody tunic stuck to his chest, each movement sending waves of pain through his frail body. The fisherman at the oars glanced back, eyes haunted by the city's destruction and the dying king beside him. Where am I going?" Priam rasped, voice barely more than a whisper. "To a safe harbor," the fisherman replied gently, though his tone betrayed uncertainty. "There, you'll find those who escaped, friends of Troy waiting to welcome you." Priam's eyes fluttered closed. Memories washed over him, his children's laughter echoing through palace halls, Hector's proud stride, Andromache's gentle smile. A single tear carved a path down his cheek as he murmured, "May the gods grant me peace." He drifted between consciousness and sleep, the rhythmic lapping of waves mingling with distant cries of seabirds. And then, his breathing stilled. The fisherman realized the king had slipped away, a sorrowful weight in the dawn's quietude. Back on land, Aeneas and Cassandra emerged from the hidden tunnels into a small cove where a handful of loyal Trojans had gathered. Among them were Anchises, Aeneas' aging father, leaning on a carved staff, and Ascanius, little Iulus, clutching his mother's cloak. Their faces were streaked with ash and tears, but resolute. Troy's flame flickered on in their hearts. Aeneas knelt beside his father, helping him toward a waiting ship. "Come, father," he urged, voice steady despite his grief. Cassandra lingered, her eyes distant as she stared back toward the smoking ruins. "I see storms ahead," she whispered, "but I also see green fields and new walls built by our sons." Aeneas wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Then we sail on, sister, for Troy's spirit, for our fallen kin, and for the promise of a tomorrow." As the small fleet set sail, masts creaking and oars dipping in unison, the dawn painted the sky in hues of rose and gold. Behind them, Troy's silhouette receded, a shattered memory swallowed by time. Ahead lay unknown waters, strange shores, and the birth of legends yet unwritten. And so ends our tale of Troy and Achilles, from a golden apple's spark to a city's flames, from brotherhood and betrayal to a new people's voyage. If you've journeyed with me through war's smoke and heroism's glare, drop a like, share your favorite moment in the comments, and hit subscribe to explore more legends. Until next time, may your own story be as epic and true